What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Neon Spotlight. This is the segment on my channel where I go back through every one of the films that Neon has produced from the very first film until whenever I get caught up. This is the fourth film I've watched in Neon's catalog, and interestingly enough, the second documentary. It seems like looking at the early work of the Neon production company, they have produced quite a few documentaries, and this is from legendary documentary filmmaker Errol Morris, who has made some of the most praised documentaries in the history of the medium, especially Gates of Heaven. I feel like you hear about that talked about, or like The Thin Blue Line. There's a ton of documentaries that Errol Morris has worked on that have just been praised and praised. And I did not know anything about this before I went into it. I don't know much about Elsa Dorfman, but I knew it was going to be about photography. I always look forward to watching things about artists discussing their art and their passion for their art. Today I'm going to be discussing with you the B-side, Elsa Dorfman's portrait photography. The B-side, Elsa Dorfman's portrait photography, is directed by Errol Morris. Portrait photographer Elsa Dorfman found her medium in 1980, the larger-than-life Polaroid Land 20 by 24 camera. For the next 35 years, she captured the surfaces of those who visited her studio: families, beat poets, rock stars, and Harvard notables. As pictures begin to fade and her retirement looms, Dorfman gives Errol Morris an inside tour of her backyard archive. So as I said, I didn't know much about this before I went into it because I don't know a whole lot about Elsa Dorfman. But this documentary was incredibly charming. It's relatively short. Even if you don't know a whole lot about Elsa Dorfman, I feel like you get enough insight into who she is as a person and the passion behind her art to be able to enjoy this documentary. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about it today. So that plot synopsis that I read covers it perfectly. This is simply a conversation between Errol Morris and Elsa Dorfman at her portrait studio, and she's kind of taking him through the history of her career, what got her interested in taking photographs, and then what eventually led her to get this larger Polaroid camera, opening this photography studio where she took portraits of these families. And she did, throughout early portions of her career, spend a lot of time with celebrities and famous people. There's even an entire story about where she got to take pictures of Bob Dylan before he went on stage. She seemed to be very close with Allen Ginsberg, so there's a lot of photographs of Allen Ginsberg throughout the film. And it is legitimately just a conversation, and I think that's what I enjoyed so much about the movie. Is it's obviously Elsa Dorfman talking about like how she got into photography and her mindset for when she's taking portraits and when she's taking photos, and listening to her talk about what photography means to her and like the truth in a picture and like what kind of story it's telling. It's really fascinating to listen to her perspective on it, because I feel like every artist, no matter what medium they're approaching, they always have an interesting idea for what the medium means to them. And a lot of hers seems to just be the fun, especially when she's taking these large photographs and like seeing families' reactions in these photos. And she said she always takes two pictures, and because of the large size of this camera, they're incredibly expensive to take. These photographs are really expensive, they're not cheap, and so she always takes two. And so the whole reason behind the title of the film, the B-side, is she always has an extra one that the family deems not the portrait that they want. And because of that, she keeps all of them, because she said it would be a complete waste to get rid of them. And it's really interesting to see the photographs that the families reject and that they don't want, because a lot of them, they're being incredibly joyful, or it's like a goofy moment, and it captures like the familial dynamic in a way that feels more authentic than the ones that they often choose, which I thought was an even more interesting idea, because I think photography as a whole is fascinating, and how it's shifted throughout the landscape of our history. Because if you think, this movie was put out, I believe, 2017, and Elsa Dorfman since then has passed away. I believe she passed away 2019, 2020, sometime in that time frame. But even someone like her who got into physical photography, you watch the creation of the cell phone, and you watch how the cell phone has grown into, like, you can get a very high grade camera on your cell phone now. You can buy lens attachments for your cell phone. There are people like Sean Baker who have shot full-length feature films with cell phones. So the concept of photography has changed to where before photography was this thing where you had to actually take time and effort and energy to go to a portrait studio, or if you're a professional photographer, really thinking about framing a shot and like the film you were going to waste and all of those things, where now you can take 1,000 photos on your phone and the only thing you have to worry about is like storage on your cell phone. And so for someone like her, listening to her kind of discuss the shift in what photography has become and what the medium means to her, I think it's fascinating, because when you set aside time to go to a portrait studio, what a photograph is going to convey to someone, there's a lot more thought in that moment about it rather than you just kind of pointing and shooting at something. And I think that's really interesting, especially if you put photography in the context of filmmaking as well, and how much easier it is for a person to just go out and shoot a movie now. Granted, it's not going to have a high production budget. It's not going to be the same thing. I mean, you had consumer grade camcorders in like the late 80s and early 90s, but the quality of the cameras now, you can make something that looks relatively professional using a cell phone or a DSLR. And so watching this really got me just thinking about photography as a medium and what it means to other people. And Elsa Dorfman just seems like a really charming, kind human being, and that really had fun talking to Errol Morris about her photography. It's not a perfect documentary by any means. I feel like, they wanted to keep it very stripped down and simplistic, so most of it's in a room, and I think utilizing the photography as really like the thing that kind of gets you from point A to point B, and mostly just seeing stagnant shots of her in a studio and then images that she captured. It works pretty well, but there are moments that even for like an hour and 20-minute documentary, that there are parts that feel a little bit repetitive, and that it feels like she's kind of touching on the same points over and over again. But I still found myself having a smile on my face, and I think that, like, even if you're not a huge documentary film fan, this was a fun movie to watch. I really enjoyed it, and I'm pleasantly surprised by it, and I'm glad I'm doing this Neon series, because if it wasn't for that, I probably never would have watched this movie. So have you seen the B-side, Elsa Dorfman's portrait photography? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. I really enjoyed it. I think Elsa Dorfman's incredibly charming, which makes it really easy to watch, and I'd recommend checking it out even if you had no interest in doing so. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.